Hi, welcome back to the course. In our previous section, we have discussed about the JSPs and servlets. We learned how to create a JSP and servlet. We also learned how we can write a Java code inside the JSP and how we can write HTML code inside the servlet. So in this section, let's dive deeper into the servlet's world and let's understand the life cycle of a servlet, when the servlet object will be created, when the servlet object will be destroyed, and we'll look at some of the servlet lifecycle methods. This section will be really interesting and you will learn a lot of things. So let's get started. We have been discussing about this client and server architecture, right? Let's discuss it one more time. When the client sends a request, the browser creates two objects, HTTP request, HTTP response. Remember, these are HTTP objects, not Java objects. The container takes that request, read the web.xml. Depending upon the URL, a servlet object will be loaded to the memory. Now, the container will create a servlet object by invoking a noConstructor argument. Once the object is created, a special method will be called, which is an init method. Init method is a part of a lifecycle method of a servlet, which will be called only once in the entire lifecycle of a servlet. This init method will be called as soon as the servlet object is created. Once the init method is called, back with another lifecycle method will be called, which is a service method. This service method will take two arguments. The container takes those HTTP objects and converted it into a Java objects, because servlet can only understand Java. So the container will convert those HTTP objects into Java objects, which is nothing but a HTTP servlet request and HTTP servlet response, and pass it to a service method. So the service method takes those two objects, and depending upon the HTTP method, a doGet or a doPost method will be called. This service method will be called each and every time when we make a request, and the service method will call doGet or doPost method. Once the processing is done, the container will convert those Java objects into HTTP objects and send it back to a client. And finally, a destroy method will be called. Some people having a misconception that destroy method will be called to destroy the servlet. No, it's not. The destroy method will be called just before shutting down the application or just before shutting down the container. Once the destroy method is called, servlet object will be removed from the container. This is the high level overview of lifecycle of a servlet. The servlet object will be created by invoking a noConstructor argument. Back with the init method will be called. Init method will be called only once in the entire lifecycle of a servlet. Back with the service method will be called. For this, the container will pass the HTTP objects converted into a Java objects, and it will give it to a service method. The service method will call the doGet or doPost method depending upon the HTTP method, and finally the destroy method will be called. Again, the destroy method will be called only once in the entire life cycle of a servlet, just before shutting down the application or just before shutting down the container. So the question is, when we will call these lifecycle methods? At what point of time we have to call these lifecycle methods? Is it necessary to override all these methods? That we will see in the next video. In the next video, we will override all these methods and we'll see exactly when the servlet object will be created and when the servlet object will be destroyed and what kind of code we can write inside the methods. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.